Americans to control the narrative. In other news, Saudi Arabia wants a NATO-style defense pact with America. Sweden's Prime Minister has called in the army to curb gang violence. The latest on the Manipur crisis in India. And can taping your mouth help you sleep better? This is not metaphorical. People are actually doing it, including celebrities. We'll bring you more. The headlines first. Niger's junta says a dozen soldiers have been killed in a militant attack. Hundreds of armed insurgents reportedly attacked the forces near the capital. The junta claims more than 100 militants have been killed in a counter-offensive. Such attacks have been on the rise since the military coup in July. Russia hosts Taliban leaders for talks on regional security. Officially, Taliban is recognized as a terrorist organization in Russia. The meeting comes days after Uzbekistan, which neighbors Afghanistan, hosted American officials. Both Moscow and Beijing have courted the Taliban. Maldives set for its presidential election runoff tomorrow. Opposition candidate Mohammad Muizzu is trying to unseat the Mohammad Soli government. The polls are being seen as part of a larger geopolitical battle between India and China. Maldives holds strategic importance for both these countries as well as the West. Elon Musk wades into the US immigration debate. The tech billionaire visits the US-Mexico border amid a surge of migrants and live streams it on X. Musk, who was born in South Africa, has called for an overhaul of immigration laws in the US. Look what's invading France. Paris has launched a battle plan against bed bugs. The blood-sucking insects have been found in public transport, cinemas and hospitals. 1/10 of all French households are believed to have had a bed bug problem in the last few years. And one of the UK's most photographed trees has been felled. A 16-year-old who was arrested for the crime has been given bail. The Sycamore Gap tree had stood for more than 200 years. It was often called the Robin Hood tree after appearing in the 1991 blockbuster film Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. Justin Trudeau has spoken again, but this time in a different tone. He wasn't flinging wild allegations at India, nor was he equating separatism to free speech. Trudeau now wants closer ties with India. Those were his words, that Canada wants to build closer relations with India, the same country he accused of murder. So what's the deal here? Does Trudeau think he was wrong, or has he realized that he is alone? We'll discuss that, but first, listen to the Canadian Prime Minister.
Growing economic power, an important geopolitical player. As we presented with our Indo-Pacific strategy just last year, we're very serious about building closer ties with India. At the same time, obviously, as a rule of law country, we need to emphasize that India needs to work with Canada to ensure that we get the full facts of this matter.
Frankly, teenagers are easier to read. First, Trudeau accused India of potentially murdering a Canadian citizen. Then he asked India to cooperate, and now he says he wants to be friends. Clearly, Trudeau missed the class on diplomacy. I can tell you a simple lesson off the top of my head. If you want friendship, do not accuse that country of murder. It doesn't matter now. Trudeau has already done the damage. The only question is, why is he dialing down? To answer that, we need to look at some recent developments. None of them look good for Trudeau. Number one, Hardeep Singh Nijjar had links to Canadian intelligence. We are not saying this, Nijjar's son is. He says his father used to meet with Canadian spooks frequently. Just how frequent? 2 to 3 times a week. These meetings began in February 2023. There was one meeting just 2 days before his murder. There was another scheduled after his death. What were these meetings about? Surely not his security. You would discuss your security with the police or the local administration. Why would you discuss it with spies? So clearly there is something more at play. And what is Canada saying about this? Nothing. As usual, it's all under investigation. But these claims raise an uncomfortable question for Canada. Was Nijjar a Canadian asset? Did Canadian spies weaponize him? According to Indian sources, it is likely. We told you about this last week. Indian sources believe that Nijjar could have been working with Canadian intelligence. His son's claims give credibility to that suspicion. Now to the second development. Trudeau's double standard has been questioned. In 2020, a Baloch activist was killed in Canada. Her name was Karima Baloch. She was kidnapped and later found dead. Most people pointed fingers at Pakistan's spy agency, the Inter-Service Intelligence, or ISI. Did Trudeau stand in the Canadian Parliament and accuse Pakistan? He did not. I guess the Baloch vote bank was not big enough. But now Karima Baloch's husband is questioning Justin Trudeau. He says Pakistan's ISI murdered her. He also wants Canada to reopen the case. Baloch rights organizations are also saying the same. Listen to their statement, and I'm quoting. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's conspicuous silence regarding the unexplained death of Karima Baloch stands in stark contrast to his impassioned speeches concerning the shooting death of Hardeep Singh Nijjar. It's hard to argue with the argument. So much anger over a potential link, yet so much negligence and silence after a mysterious death. Now to the third development, a meeting between India and the US in Washington. India's Foreign Minister S. Jaishankar is in the US. On Thursday, he met Secretary of State Antony Blinken. Everyone had the same question. Would they discuss the Canada issue? Well, the official statement does not mention it. It talks about the G20, it talks about space and defense, but it does not mention Canada. That doesn't mean it did not come up. India's Foreign Minister says he did talk about Canada, both with Blinken and with National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan. Listen in.
Speak about it with Jake Sullivan and Tony Blinken? Yes, I did. They obviously shared, U.S. views and assessments on this whole situation, and I explained to them at some length. What I gave you was a summary of the concerns which I had. So I think hopefully we both came out of those meetings better informed.
Minister Jaishankar did elaborate on India's concerns. He said Canada has a permissive attitude towards extremism.
Been an issue of great friction for many years with Canada. In the last few years, it has come back very much into play because of what we consider to be a very permissive Canadian attitude towards terrorists, extremists, people who openly advocate violence. And they have been given operating space in Canada. Today, I am actually in a situation where my diplomats are unsafe going to the embassy or to the consulates.
And what did Blinken say? Reports say he urged India to cooperate with Canada. And this is not new. The US has asked India to cooperate multiple times. So why not include it in the statement? Maybe the US wants quiet diplomacy. Maybe they wanted to focus on the positives only. Either way, it's not a good look for Justin Trudeau. He said Blinken would raise the issue with Jaishankar, but the statement doesn't even mention it. So much for Canada's closest ally and friend. Development number 4 is the support for India. I'm not sure Justin Trudeau expected this. Domestically, Indians have rallied behind the government, opposition parties, civil society, even hackers. This week, the website of Canada's armed forces was hacked. It was disabled for 2 hours. The cyber attack was claimed by the Indian Cyber Force. It's a pro-India hacking group. They shared screenshots on social media. Of course, India had nothing to do with it. These hackers operate outside official control. But who knows? Maybe Justin Trudeau will find a potential link here too. India's neighbours are also rallying against Canada. Sri Lanka was the first to speak out. Their foreign minister called Trudeau's allegations outrageous. He also said Canada harbours terrorists. And now Bangladesh is saying the same. Listen to what their foreign minister said. I'm quoting, "The murderers can go to Canada and take shelter, and they can have a wonderful life while those they killed, their relatives, are suffering." Again, it's hard to argue with that. The fact is, Justin Trudeau is isolated. Maybe the US has supported him behind closed doors, but in public they have not. And they won't unless he offers proof. It's been 12 days since Trudeau made his allegations. We're still waiting for the evidence. So the choice is now his. He can keep spending political capital on the issue, or he can dial down. He can handle this maturely and diplomatically. Trudeau may have fired the first shot in this face-off, but he's now in defense mode. The media, the Indian government, activists, everyone is questioning his charges or his past hypocrisy. So does he retreat or push forward? What he chooses could decide the future of India-Canada relations, maybe his own political future too. Now let's turn our attention to Russia and the frozen war in Ukraine. When was the last time you heard major news from the front lines there? Last year was about Russia invading and annexing territory. This year was supposed to be about Kiev's counteroffensive. But the war seems to have stalled. Ukraine says it is progressing just slowly. And why isn't Russia moving forward? There may be a lot of reasons, but the prominent one is this: the Wagner group is missing. Russia no longer has the Wagner fighters at the forefront. And Putin wants to change that. Let me show you how. This video was released today. Putin addressing a man in the presence of Russia's deputy defense minister. The man he's talking to is a veteran. He was part of the Russian army, in Russia's special forces. He was also part of the Wagner private mercenary group. His name is Andrei Troshev. He goes by the alias Sedoy. That means the grey-haired one. And this man has seen it all. When he was young, he fought for the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. He also fought in Chechnya and Syria. In Syria, he was given one of Russia's highest honors in 2016, the Hero of Russia Award. But by then, he was out of the armed forces. In Syria, he was serving as a Wagner commander. Troshev has been a senior leader with Wagner for years, and Putin has stabbed him again.
Andrei Nikolaevich, I would like to begin the meeting by speaking to you in the first place. At the last meeting, we talked about you working on forming volunteer units that can perform various combat tasks. Above all, of course, in the zone of a special military operation. You have been fighting for over a year in one of those units. You know what it is, how it is done. You know about the issues that need to be resolved in advance so that the combat work goes in the best and most successful way.
Now, Putin said all this in front of Russia's deputy defense minister, and the reason is clear. It was a message to the Russian military. Troshev will be in charge of mercenary units. He will lead the Wagner group. The Russian army has to stay out of his way. And this is a remarkable turnaround. Just last month, it seemed like Wagner was done for. Their leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, was dead. He was killed in a plane crash along with his core team. A convenient crash, considering that they challenged Putin's authority. Prigozhin led a march on Moscow in June, but he balked at the last minute. Then he went into exile, and exactly 2 months later came his convenient death. But the fall of Wagner also heralded the fall of Russian efficiency. Think about how the war has progressed. Moscow's last major victory was Bakhmut. It was the war's bloodiest battle, and it ended with Wagner's win. Prigozhin himself had sounded the bugle, and there's no doubt that his troops were the reason behind that success. He got Bakhmut. He also had a host of other achievements under his belt. Before the war, he had turned Wagner into a global force. From Africa to West Asia, wherever a professional force was needed, Wagner appeared. They fought in Syria, Libya, Mali, and other war zones. They became one of Russia's most battle-hardened battalions, also one of the richest. Wagner had business interests across the world. It meant that this elite force was also paid well. Money usually means high morale. Last year, Putin pointed them at Ukraine, and the results followed. Wagner succeeded on the battlefield. It pushed Ukraine back. And Prigozhin was rewarded for his effectiveness. His stature kept rising until it rose too much. It ended with a mutiny and the fall of Wagner. But what happened to their soldiers? After the mutiny, they were withdrawn from Ukraine. Some were sent to a base in Belarus. Then they were forced to swear allegiance to Moscow. Some others were absorbed into Russia's military. And over the last month, they've been returning to the front lines. But these troops are no longer the Wagner group. They've been split, some into the army, some into other mercenary groups, almost like a divide and conquer strategy. It also took away their effectiveness. Ukrainian officials keep pointing this out. They say Wagner has lost the edge. So it seems Putin has changed his mind. He wants Wagner back, and that too under a former commander. The focus is once again Bakhmut. As we speak, it is again turned into the theatre of war. Ukraine wants to reclaim it. It would be a major symbolic victory for them. So Putin wants to unleash on them a revamped Wagner. And talking about war and violence, we have news from Pakistan. It's the day after Eid today. The world marked the birthday of Prophet Muhammad, Eid ul-Milad. And Friday is a holy day in Islam, so people gathered in mosques in large numbers. But in Balochistan, the celebrations took a deadly turn. There was a blast near a mosque. More than 50 people were killed. It was a suicide bombing. It happened at a time when rallies from two mosques were converging at a point. That's when the bomber detonated his device. What followed was absolute chaos, people screaming, others fleeing the site, many rushing for help.
I was passing near to the rally when the blast happened. I don't know the reason, as I became unconscious after the blast. I was scared too. I saw so many bodies lying here and there. Bodies were lying for at least 2 hours. No one from the government side was here. People shifted bodies in their own private vehicles.
More than 50 people dead, many more injured. The death toll could rise, and this wasn't the only blast in Pakistan today. Another one took place in Hangu, that's near the city of Peshawar. This one too happened at a mosque. We cannot confirm the death toll, but estimates suggest at least 4 people were killed. So one holy day and 2 deadly blasts. That's a lot even for Pakistan. Their Interior Ministry has called it a heinous act. They say they're investigating. They also knew this was coming. Days before the blasts, authorities had asked the police to stay vigilant. They issued warnings. They said terrorists could target rallies, especially those marking the Prophet's birthday. So they knew it could happen, but they were not able to stop it. Which brings us to the question, who was behind these blasts? No group has taken responsibility yet, but all fingers point towards the TTP, the Tehreek-e-Taliban Pakistan, also known as the Pakistani Taliban. They've been behind recent terror attacks in the country, but this time, even the TTP has denied involvement. They say such attacks are against their policy, whatever it is. The other possible culprit could be the Islamic State, but even they haven't said anything yet. So we still don't know who is behind the blasts. But we definitely know one thing. For decades, Pakistan has harbored terrorists. It has funded terror camps. It has exported terror to the world. Now the chickens are coming home to roost. And while terrorism still remains Pakistan's biggest export, they've added another item to the list. Beggars. I'm not making this up. In fact, I'm not even the one saying this. This has come from the Pakistani government, from a standing committee of the Pakistan Senate. Listen to what they've said. 90% of all beggars detained in foreign countries are Pakistanis. 90%. How did they get there in the first place? Mostly on the pretext of performing the Hajj. Most of them go on the Umrah visa. They travel abroad in the name of pilgrimage, and then they don't return. They stay back and beg for a living. Now, West Asian countries are not happy about this. Saudi Arabia and Iraq are complaining. They say their jails are full of Pakistani beggars. They want Islamabad to put a stop to this. Saudi Arabia has apparently issued a strict warning. It wants Pakistan to monitor who gets an Umrah visa. And it wants a crackdown on repeat offenders. It tells you how bad the situation in Pakistan is. But then again, this flows from the top. Pakistani leaders do the same. They have gone to West Asia multiple times asking for money. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif recently spoke about it himself. Listen in.
वाजपेयी साहब जब वजीर आजम बने तो $1 बिलियन हिंदुस्तान के खजाने में नहीं था, लेकिन आज उनके पास $600 बिलियन जो है ना वो कहां से आ गया है। और हम $1 बिलियन आज भी मुल्क जाके मांग रहे हैं। क्या इज्जत है हमारी आज? उनकी नजरों में भी क्या इज्जत है? चाइना से हम मांगते हैं, अरब मुल्कों से हम मांगते हैं, हमारा वजीर आज़म जाके उसको मजबूर होता है वो मांगने के लिए।
And when Pakistani leaders aren't begging, their diplomats are caught stealing and pickpocketing. In South Korea, 2 Pakistani diplomats were caught shoplifting. They were stealing chocolates and hats. Another bureaucrat was caught stealing a Kuwaiti delegate's wallet. So if leaders are begging and diplomats are stealing, can their Senate really blame these people who beg? And this is not funny. This is a moment of reckoning for Pakistan. It is grappling with an economic and political crisis. Its economy is in free fall. Inflation is at a record high. 40% of the population lives below the poverty line. Its citizens are leaving the country to beg in other nations. Their entire system is geared to help only one party, the Pakistani army. It is immune to everything. Inflation, budget cuts, nothing touches them. The people of Pakistan should think about it, or they'll keep suffering attacks and the humiliation that such reports bring. They say two things are always certain: death and taxes. Well, not anymore in Argentina. And before you freak out, no, they have not discovered the secret to immortality. They have done away with taxes. That's right. Argentina's Senate has passed a new bill. It seeks to abolish income tax. Not for everyone, not for all workers, but for most of them. Around 1.3 million workers in the formal sector will benefit. No taxes for them. Only a tiny fraction will keep paying income tax. Those who earn more than $5,000 per month, they will have to pay an income tax. That's around 1.7 million pesos. And how many people earn that much in Argentina? Just 1% of the payroll workers, which means 99% of all payroll workers in Argentina will not have to pay income tax. The bill will now head to the president's desk. Once he signs it, it will become law. Now, I know you have questions like, is this even possible? Why is Argentina doing this? And how will it affect their economy? To answer the first question, yes. If governments want, they can abolish income tax. For example, the UAE does not have income tax. Neither does the Bahamas or Monaco. But these countries have avenues to make up. The UAE has oil. Monaco has yachts and casinos. The Bahamas has tourism. What does Argentina have? None of these. Argentina's decision is political. Their presidential elections are next month, and the finance minister is a candidate. The same minister who introduced this no income tax policy, he's running for president. His name is Sergio Massa. The sitting president and his coalition are supporting him. Just one problem though, he is losing. Massa came third in the primary vote last month. So what does he do? Go on a spending spree. He has increased financial handouts, given more social security checks, raised the salary of government employees, and now ended income tax. How much will all of this cost? According to some economists, $5.7 billion. The problem is, Argentina does not have this money. Their plan is to print more currency. It's always a bad idea. If you print more notes, you will create more inflation. And let me emphasize on more here, because Argentina's inflation is already 124%. So ideally, they should be spending less. They should be increasing taxes. Instead, income tax has been abolished in the country, or they're trying to do it at least. I'm afraid no economic theory can explain this decision. It's just politicians being politicians. Having said that, this could be temporary. Argentina's new government takes charge in December. They can easily reverse this by then. But also by then, the damage could be done, because Argentina is renegotiating a bailout with the IMF. The original deal was for $44 billion. Out of this, around $7.5 billion has not been transferred. The IMF says, show us progress. Only then will you get the money. But with decisions like this one, I'm not so sure. And the IMF has commented on Argentina's no income tax policy. It says it adds to the country's challenges. In other words, you're not helping your case. Does this mean reducing or abolishing income tax is a bad idea? The UAE and Monaco would disagree. Both places are doing really well. So here's our question. Should India also give it a shot? Well, ending income tax may not be an option here, but what about reducing it? Many economists have talked about this. You see, only 1.6% of India's population pays income tax, 1.6. Compare that to other countries. In the US, around 53% people pay federal income taxes. In France, more than 50% households pay income tax, but India's rate is very low, 1.6%, and those paying income tax pay a lot of it in India. The maximum tax rate in India is more than 42%. That's the basic tax plus surcharge and cess. It's very high. It's comparable to developed countries. France has a maximum rate of 49%. Italy has 47%, Japan has 45%, and the UK has 40%. But there's a key difference. The quality of public goods and services, roads, public health, air quality, all of it is much better in the developed world. In other words, the high rates are worth it. When they pay a high income tax, they get the facilities to match that cost. You cannot say that about India. And the result is this: high net worth individuals are moving out of the country. In 2022, 7,500 of them left India. A similar number has left this year as well. And this is troubling because these people are taking their money with them. Their investable money is leaving India. So India needs to rethink its taxes, not like Argentina, but for its own reasons. It's true that India has a huge wealth gap, but taxes alone cannot solve that. And now let's turn our attention to China. Just like the US is doing, America is worried about China's creeping global influence. It has been wary for years. It has been studying this influence, and now Washington has released a report. It's called How the People's Republic of China Seeks to Reshape the Global Information Environment. And it's quite thorough. From bribery to bullying, Beijing does all of it. It's determined to control information and, by extension, control the narrative. Of course, this is not surprising. Anyone who knows China will find this obvious. What is surprising is the timing of this report. It comes amid a concerted effort to cool tensions. The US has been trying to arrange a meeting. They want Xi Jinping to come to the US on an official visit. If he agrees, it would be his first such visit during the Biden presidency. Will this new report, no matter how accurate, offend Beijing? Will Xi Jinping call off this meeting like he's been doing off late? Here's a report.
And Dr. Glover, thank you.
Lately, Washington has been giving Beijing both wanted and unwanted attention. The US has been blowing hot and cold when it comes to its relationship with its arch rival. First, for the positive outreach. The US has been ramping up its engagement with China recently. Every month seems to mark another high-level meeting. Secretary of State Antony Blinken went to China in June. Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen in July. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo in August. And finally, this month saw US National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan meet Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi. This was in the European nation of Malta.
We have seen an increase in the tempo of our conversations with the Chinese government across a number of fronts since the Secretary traveled to Beijing in June.
It doesn't end there. Reports say Chinese Vice Premier He Lifeng may go to Washington soon. Then there are plans for a Wang Yi visit next month as well. All this will set the stage for a grand finale. Xi Jinping going to the US. The Chinese president may visit in November. Officially, the reason would be the upcoming Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Summit. The US government is chairing it this year. But that may just be an excuse for Xi to visit. After all, he has a lot of other concerns when it comes to the US. From trade wars to aggressive posturing in the Indo-Pacific, everywhere you look, a new US-China shadow battleground pops up. It must be a lot to deal with. Especially for China, which is going through an economic slowdown and a real estate sector crisis. Xi might have been hoping to iron out at least some of these differences. But instead, he's now staring at a new flashpoint. The US just came out with a new report. Here are the highlights.
It describes how China, the People's Republic of China, has invested billions of dollars to construct a global information ecosystem to promote propaganda, censorship, and disinformation. The net result of these PRC efforts is to transform the global information landscape and damage the security and stability of the United States, its friends and partners.
Propaganda, disinformation, and intimidation, directed at making China look good and at damaging the security and stability of the US and its allies. This report was released by the US State Department. If you go through it, the report describes a beast with innumerable tentacles, each arm reaching across the globe and choking the truth and facts. China wants to portray itself as a shining beacon of knowledge and prosperity, one that is infallible and benevolent. All this is ridiculous, of course. It's the same propaganda it feeds its own citizens. Now, Beijing wants to export this brainwashing to the world. The report helps to set the record straight. If people actually read it, then China may have a problem. Xi's grand game may get ruined. So, this new report may be a sticking point. It certainly won't help convince Xi to normalize ties with the US. It may just keep him away from the APEC summit in November as well. While the report may thwart Washington's diplomacy, it is important and timely. It reminds both the US and the rest of the world of the truth. When it comes to Beijing, people should know exactly the kind of beast they're dealing with.
Vantage continues after a short break. Now to the biggest deal in West Asia, a Saudi-Israel peace deal. A few years back, this would have been unthinkable, but now it looks within reach. Both sides say a deal is closer. Then what's the holdup? The Saudi demands. They want a NATO-style deal from the US, basically an Article 5 commitment. What does that mean? What is an Article 5-like commitment? An attack on Saudi Arabia will be seen as an attack on America. That's what Riyadh wants. Will they get it? We'll have to wait and see. What about Palestine? It's part of the list of demands, but no one seems to be losing sleep over it. The top priority is the Saudi-US Defense Pact. It was first discussed in 2022. That's when Joe Biden met MBS. He was on a trip to woo the Saudis. It was an awkward and frosty affair. Riyadh asked for a defense deal. The Biden administration apparently shot it down. So no NATO-like pact for Saudi Arabia. But it will get a defense pact like other US allies. Reports say it could. Same thing, something like a treaty, the kind that Washington has with Asian states or even Bahrain. And to make the deal sweeter, the US is throwing in a tag, a designation for Saudi Arabia. They'll be called a major non-NATO ally. This is a designation that Israel already has. By the way, Pakistan too has it. Pakistan is a major non-NATO ally for America. So this is what the Saudis are being offered. Will they accept it? Again, it's hard to say. They were pretty adamant about the security guarantee. They suggested it could make or break the deal. Now, for the US to offer this, they will need support from the Congress because unlike MBS, Biden doesn't rule a kingdom. He will have to get others on board and it won't be easy. Also, it doesn't help that the same Biden vowed to turn Saudi Arabia into a pariah state and not very long ago. So a defense pact is still up in the air. The second demand is this, a civilian nuclear program. That's what Saudi Arabia wants. And reports say it's making a compromise on this front. Saudi Arabia is ready to sign Section 123 of the US Atomic Energy Act. What does this do? It establishes a framework for peaceful nuclear cooperation. It's something that Riyadh has refused to do before. They wanted nuclear cooperation, but no such conditions. Now they seem to be dialing down and making concessions. Their third demand was Palestine, to make sure that the Palestinian cause is not completely abandoned. And this is a political demand. You see, Saudi Arabia is the de facto leader of the Muslim world. It still upholds the Arab Peace Initiative. Do you know what it says? There will be no recognition of Israel without resolving the Israel-Palestine conflict. And the conflict is nowhere near resolution. So how can there be a deal with Israel? When the first reports of normalization came out, Palestine jumped into action. It went to Riyadh with a set of demands. It wanted Saudi Arabia to make those demands on behalf of Palestine. And what were the demands? Transferring Israeli-controlled territory to West Bank to Palestine, limiting Jewish settlement activity and halting any steps to annex West Bank. But the problem is, Israel would never agree to these. They have a far-right government, the most extreme in their history. Prime Minister Netanyahu leads a coalition government. He needs his allies to survive, and these allies do not agree to Palestinian demands. So concessions to Palestine may not materialize. But this may not stop the deal. In the new scheme of things, Palestine is expendable, has been for a while. It's a bit of a smokescreen. All sides talk about it, but they don't do very much about it. Palestine was never going to affect the deal. Saudi Arabia may have positioned itself as a Palestinian advocate. Its leader may be talking about concessions. Its people may care about Palestinians, but only up to a point. When the kingdom has to make a choice between Palestine and peace, it will most likely choose peace, with the bonus of nuclear energy and American security. There's an uneasy calm in Manipur. Last night was a violent one. Hundreds of protesters took to the streets of Imphal. They clashed with security officials. Vehicles and tires were burnt. Tear gas and pellet guns were used. At least 80 people were reportedly injured. Thankfully, today was better. The government has imposed an indefinite curfew in parts of the state. A few protesters did turn up, but the situation was largely under control. Like I said, it's an uneasy calm because the underlying tensions still persist. We told you about the latest flare-up yesterday. Manipur had lifted internet curbs after 5 months. Immediately, pictures began to circulate. Pictures of 2 dead students. They'd gone missing in July this year. Despite a police complaint, they could not be traced. This week, pictures of their dead bodies emerged. And that's when violence broke out. On Wednesday, mobs attacked the regional office of BJP, that's the ruling party of Manipur, also the ruling party of India. They also hurled petrol bombs at police stations. Then yesterday, the chief minister's home was targeted. A mob tried to breach his official residence. The police later confirmed that he was not at home when it happened. Neither was his family. Biren Singh is the chief minister of Manipur. He's been under fire since the violence broke out in May. Some of his own party lawmakers have accused him of bias, of negligence, and of administrative failure. This week's violence triggered a sharp response from security forces. Around 40,000 troops are deployed in Manipur. Plus, you have the state police officers. They cracked down heavily on the mobs this week. But some tactics have been questioned. For example, the use of pellets. These are projectiles, but they're different from bullets. Pellets slightly tear tissues. Bullets completely shred them. Now, reports say some students were hit with these pellets. One of them had 60 particles lodged in his shoulder. The security agencies have denied these claims, but if true, it would be a first because activists say pellets had not been used until now. The Manipur government has taken note of this. They have formed a 2-member committee. Its job is to probe the allegations to find out if excessive force was used. What's happening in Manipur is heartbreaking for every Indian. If you live in Manipur, even more so. But one Manipuri girl overcame her trauma to make India proud. Her name is Roshi Bina Devi. She was part of India's wushu team at the Asian Games. She won the silver medal. But during her post-match interaction, she broke down, and you can imagine why. Her home state is burning. While other athletes look forward to a grand homecoming, she cannot. Her family is safe for now, but like she herself said, anything can happen. Later on, Roshi Bina Devi composed herself and she dedicated her medal to Manipur.
ये मेडल मेरा मणिपुर लोगों अभी मणिपुर के लिए जितना वो कर रहा है मतलब हम लोग के लिए लड़ रहा है वो लोग को डेडिकेट करता हूँ हम लोग को जाति को इतना अभी वो लोग ने प्रोटेक्ट किया है इसके लिए वो लोग को डेडिकेट करना चाहता हूँ.
The current situation is not sustainable. You cannot run a state with 40,000 soldiers, nor can you cut internet forever, which brings us to the peace process. What's the update on that? Well, the trust deficit has not narrowed. Consider the recent decision to extend special army powers in Manipur. We told you about this yesterday. AFSPA is the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It has been extended in Manipur's hill areas. Meanwhile, the valley is exempt. And tribal groups are asking, why is that? Now, to give you some context, Manipur's tribal communities live in the hills, including the Kukis. The majority Métis live in the valley. And this current standoff is between these two groups, the Kukis and the Métis. The tribals have now appealed to the Union Home Ministry. They say the state government's decision is biased and oppressive. So peace is still far off. Times like these call for able leadership, able and unbiased leadership. Because in such situations, it's not just about whether the two groups trust each other. It's about whether they trust the peace broker. A once peaceful Nordic nation has become the gun murder capital of Europe. I'm talking about Sweden. Every year in Sweden, 4 in a million die in shootings. It doesn't sound like very much, 4 in a million people. But in the European context, it's extraordinary. Across Europe, this number is 1.6. In 2021, 45 people were killed by gunfire in Sweden. In 2022, it increased to a record 62. Now, experts say this year is set to be even worse. In fact, September has become the worst month on record with 11 deaths by shooting. Do you know what's behind this trend? Gang violence. Sweden has been rocked by infighting. What's worse, a successful police operation has made things worse. Now, Sweden's Prime Minister has turned to the army. He wants the troops to curb the gangs. Here's a report.
This week, Sweden met with a bloody 12-hour wake-up call. Late on Wednesday, an 18-year-old man was shot dead in Stockholm. Hours later, south of the capital in Jordbro, another man was killed in a shooting. Early on Thursday, a woman in her 20s died in an explosion in Uppsala, west of Stockholm. All 3 murders are unrelated, but they share one commonality. They were a result of gang violence. This Scandinavian nation is home to about 10 million people. It used to be a peaceful, inclusive society. But now, this country has become the gun murder capital of the world. Sweden is in the grip of a gun crime crisis. Many say deadly gang violence has turned the nation into a war zone. According to official government data, 4 in every million inhabitants die in shootings each year in Sweden. Much higher than the European average of 1.6. In 2021, 45 people were killed by gunfire. In 2022, the number increased to 62 out of 391 shootings that year. Now, just over 60 dead does not sound like a big number. Sweden's homicidal rate is 1/6 of that in the US. But in the European context, this is a shockingly high number. Stockholm's gun murder rate is 30 times higher than London's.
Sweden has never seen anything like it. No other country in Europe is experiencing anything like this.
September has become the worst month for shooting deaths in Sweden since records began in 2016. After the deaths this week, the total stands at 11. Sweden's Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson is in a bind. So now he is seeking help from the army. He summoned the head of the armed forces.
We will hunt the gangs and we will defeat them. We will take them to court. If they are Swedish citizens, they will be locked up for a long time in prison. And if they are foreign citizens, they will also be expelled.
The PM says he will push for more surveillance, harsher penalties, more stop and search zones, and stronger deportation powers. An official plan is yet to be chalked out. It is not clear how the military might get involved. The head of the army believes they will assist police officers. But some critics have described these measures as superficial. They say these steps will treat the symptoms, not the problem. Years ago, gangs used to be a small regional issue in Sweden. But now they have become a national plague. Why is that? There are a couple of reasons. Poor integration of immigrants. a widening gap between rich and poor, and drug use. But a bigger explanation, ironically, points to police action. A successful police operation, that too. In 2020, French police broke the codes of a criminal communications network. This enabled police all over Europe to track down criminals. Thousands of arrests were made. Over 400 criminals were arrested in Sweden, and sentences totaled over 1,500 years in prison. The leaders of Swedish gangs were cut off, but the result was unexpected. This left a power vacuum in the underworld. As a result, young gang members began vying for power. They began fighting for dominance in lucrative drug markets. Police say more and more children are contacting criminal gangs, offering to commit murders. Child gangsters are throwing hand grenades and blowing up bombs, trying to kill their rivals, while a growing number of bystanders become collateral damage.
More and more children and completely innocent people are affected by the serious violence. I cannot emphasize enough how serious the situation is.
The question really is, can bringing in the army give Sweden an out? The country is hopeful, but skepticism is rife. Since controlling Sweden's young gangsters is no child's play.
Social media trends have been great for a number of things. They can help us get a groove on, or inspire us to cook something adventurous. They can even bless us with funny cat videos. But what about wellness trends? There's a new one now. It's called mouth taping. It promises to help you snore less, to give you more energy, even improve your skin. Now, this trend comes hot on the heels of another one, putting garlic up the nose to clear sinuses, or eating dry protein powder to enhance its effects. All very exciting, also all potentially very dangerous. Wellness trends are rarely based on scientific evidence. So why do they spread like wildfire? Why are so many people taking health tips from social media? Our next report tells you.
In one TikTok video, an influencer claims it gives her more energy. In another video, someone else says it makes her jawline sharper. Others say it improves their digestion and mood, or that it reduces brain fog, cavities, even gum disease. What is this ever-helpful magic trick everyone's talking about? Mouth taping. Yes, it's as bizarre as it sounds. It's a so-called life hack that began as a TikTok trend. It involves placing a piece of tape over one's lips to help keep them shut while sleeping. This encourages breathing through the nose, and it's supposed to have wide-ranging benefits. So it's spread like wildfire on social media. It has even been championed by actor Gwyneth Paltrow. If Paltrow says it's good, it must be, right? Well, her track record with wellness advice doesn't really agree, and neither do doctors. Science says breathing through your nose has benefits. It helps filter out dust and pollen. It moistens and warms the air we breathe, which prevents airways from becoming irritated. Nasal breathing has positives, but it doesn't mean one should give up on breathing from their mouth. Forcing oneself to do so can be quite dangerous, especially for those who suffer from a blocked nose or allergies. For them, this TikTok trend can become problematic. But that's the worst case scenario. Even if it isn't a matter of harm, the potential benefits of mouth taping aren't proven by science. It does not make jawlines sharper or help with cavities. Because here's the thing about social media trends. They're good for a number of things, like recipes, cat videos, or style inspiration. But when it comes to wellness trends, the consequences can be harmful. Just look at these trends. There was sunscreen contouring to make one's face look sculpted, putting garlic up one's nostrils to clear sinuses, consuming dry protein powder to increase its benefits, cooking sleepy chicken. Now this one may make you recoil in horror. Here, a chicken is cooked in sleep-inducing syrups like NyQuil. Experts say none of these trends work, and all of them are potentially dangerous. Yet millions of such videos float on the internet. With peppy background music and an excited influencer, any health myth feels like a truth. People often follow these wellness trends without any research, let alone medical advice from an actual doctor. Why is that? Why do such practices become popular without any evidence to back them? According to experts, there are a few reasons. The biggest one is it all boils down to human nature. People want the path of least resistance. It's simple to follow a quick tip or life hack rather than do the real work. They want quick relief, and social media offers that. That's not all. Most people are hesitant to visit a doctor unless absolutely necessary. It could be due to health illiteracy or healthcare inequalities, even time constraints. So, if doom scrolling presents itself as a savior, why not? The number of health trends are overwhelming. It's tough to differentiate between the ones that actually offer benefits from the ones that don't. But doctors say it's best to be on the safer side, to use one's discretion. Taking fashion tips from TikTok is okay. Learning a new recipe from Instagram is alright too. But gambling with one's health does not fit the same bill.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Pakistan, a TV debate turned into a wrestling match as two panelists beat up each other during a heated conversation. In New York, police officers used their dog to shepherd goats on the loose in a residential neighborhood. And the Netherlands cricket team has landed in India, and they were greeted by some blessings from fans. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1938, Germany, Italy, Britain and France established the Munich Agreement. The agreement was aimed at appeasing Hitler. We're leaving you with that. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend.
वो खाना
Working. Oh, come on, go the other way.
Om Aim Rim Klim Chamundaya Viche Om Glom Hum Klim Jum Sah Jwala Jwala Jwal Jwal Prajwal Prajwal Aim Rim Klim Chamundaya Viche Jwal Ham Sham Lam Sham Fat Swaha. ಸಂಸದರಿಗೆ ಮರ್ಯಾದಿಲ್ಲದ 28 ಸಂಸದರಿಗೆ ತೊಲಗಲಿ 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 ಬೇಕು ಬೇಕೇ ಬೇಕು ತಮಿಳುನಾಡಿಗೆ ನೀರು ಬಿಡುತ್ತಿರುವ ರಾಜ್ಯ ಸರ್ಕಾರ ವಿಡಿಯೋ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಣ್ಣ ಎಂಪಿಗಳು ಮುಖ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಣ್ಣ ಮುಖ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ ಎಂಪಿಗಳು ಮುಖ ತೋರಿಸ್ತೀವಿ ಅಷ್ಟೇ ಎಂಪಿಗಳು ಹೇಳ್ತೀವಿ ಸರ್ ದಯಮಾಡಿ ಕೆಲಸ ಮಾಡಬೇಕು ನೀವು ಪಾರ್ಲಿಮೆಂಟ್ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಮಾಡಿ ಸರ್ಕಲ್ ಕಾವೇರಿ ವಿಚಾರದಲ್ಲಿ ಮಾತನಾಡದ ಎಂಪಿಗಳಿಗೆ ಶಿವಣ್ಣ ಮುಂದೆ ಕೊಡಪ್ಪ ಶಿವಣ್ಣ ಬಂದವನ ಎಂಪಿ ಕೊಡ